Tony, we have a special guest here, and he wrote this book to know with certainty. How can you know with certainty that Jesus exists? And that's what this book's all about, isn't it?
It's exactly what it's all about.
We have Dr. Southard. Southard,
yes. We pronounce it Southard up in Virginia.
up in Virginia. Yeah. Southard, okay. You just, instead of being Southland, you're Southard.
Yes.
Like Southard up there. No. But anyways, so glad to have you. I'm glad you came to be with us today. We have a lot to talk about. Bowling, we put you on the same day as that because we thought there's so many young people that really know that he does exist.
Right.
Doesn't he?
Exactly.
So what do you tell them?
Well, I tell my young people that I work with to use your mind.
Use your mind. Because
it is a battle of the minds. We like to say it's a battle of the heart, and it certainly is. But it's also a battle of the mind. The great commandment was love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And very often we forget that last part, that we are supposed to do that. I wrote this book. Originally, the title was What I Want My Grandchildren to Know.
Oh, good for you.
That was the original title. And as I began to work on it, I realized that this has a broader audience. As a matter of fact, as I shared what I was doing with other people, they said, you really ought to make this more of a wider audience and everything. So that's what I did. And it's basically written because we are losing too many of our young people today.
Yes, we are.
To the faith and to the church. And the statistics are not good when you look at those, because I think not only our church and our families, but our country is at stake. I consider the issue of losing our young people from our church a national security issue.
Yeah.
Probably as great as any other we have. We can talk about energy crisis, immigration, foreign policy, and all that. But if we erode ourselves from inside, we're in big trouble.
Yes, a house divided against itself can't stand.
And it is divided.
And it's very divided right now.
Right.
And so we have to pray daily for our country and for our people, our leaders.
Yes.
And we must pray for them.
Correct.
So I was reading in here, does God exist? How do you answer that one?
That's the easiest question of all to answer, if people will only look. Interestingly enough, it's science that provides the most tangible evidence. I know often we like to say science and faith are at odds with each other. It's anything but that. The scientific advances we're having today come together to, the Bible does not need it to be proven,
Yes.
but the scientific evidence comes together more and more to support the Bible. Let us say. There should be no differences between the scientific community and the faith community, but the most tangible evidence is coming from science. When you look at creation, the origin of man, all the miraculous, unbelievable, intelligently designed processes that go on in our bodies or in nature itself. Something as common and we know about is the genetic code. Bill Gates himself has said that the genetic code is the most elaborate computer program ever put together. Well, we know who put that together.
Well, of course, yes. And he knows all and does all and created all.
That's correct, yeah.
He did.
That's right.
In the back of your book, I just want to mention this. It's wonderful because it has prophecies about Jesus, just like this pamphlet. This is a little
rose
bit more,
pamphlet you were talking about.
Yeah, it's a little bit more extended, but there are, I think I saw 50 or something back here.
I think I have 40-some,
40
and they have 100, but
yeah.
I didn't have enough pages.
No, but still, just this alone.
I know.
I mean, what are the chances of Isaiah saying there's going to be a virgin with a child? What are the chances of it saying...
Well, the Daniel prophecies.
Yes.
On a certain day he would come into Jerusalem,
Yes.
Yeah.
And what are the chances of being born in Bethlehem? What are the chances?
Yeah.
It's like, everything that was prophesied has been fulfilled with Jesus, that except for
Right.
his coming again, and that's happening.
Well, interesting you should bring that up because there's more and more now. I'm a scientist, and so I
Oh,
come
you
from
are,
a
so,
scientific
yeah.
background. But, science takes itself up so far, and then it can't explain certain things.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it leads us to have to consider the supernatural, which are prophecies.
Yes.
And the supernatural things that take place, like miracles. Well, that's the way it is. And we can't dismiss the supernatural, which is where God comes in and performs these supernatural things, because he's such a transcendent being. He can operate in realms that we never can even dream of.
Well, what I can't understand, okay, for a scientist, how in the world could they take a Darwin theory from a tadpole that I could be a people? Where did it change? What did it, that I can never understand the scientist. Where I can believe in creation really easy. But believing that I was coming from a pollywog or a whatever.
Yeah. That's a great question, because this is where evolution falls down on the very first fundamental question. How did life first begin?
Yeah.
Because science cannot explain that. When we talk about the genetic code and the probability of that even happened, this is where high mathematics gets involved. But it is improbable. It's so improbable it is impossible. We're talking about those kind of statistics. But evolution cannot answer that first fundamental question. How did life begin? Now, I'm not saying that evolution is all bad. I think there may be evolvement within species. We have something we call microevolution or speciation. That is acceptable to Christians. Where we get in disagreement is macroevolution. Let's say that we are somehow come from a tadpole, like you said, or some primordial slime back there where these chemical reactions got together.
I mean, they still exist, the tadpoles.
Yeah, exactly.
So what made them stop making people? I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
Right.
Right? What do you think, Tony?
Why are you saying that? I'm just actually thinking about that. How can that, from a tadpole, create something else as well as a being? It's hard to just even picture that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what they really like to compare us to is the primates and the monkeys, those types of species.
But there's still primates and monkeys.
Yes, they are.
And
Yeah.
it's funny that he talked about the monkeys. My wife and I last summer we went to the zoo. We went to the zoo, and it was an ape up against the wall, and he was asleep, and he actually looked like a human being. And I, even when he was waking up, I could picture myself doing that same thing he was doing, yawning, and I was like, he looked just like a man, but he was a gorilla there. So I mean, it just mind boggling,
Well, even Darwin himself backed up on it, didn't he?
Yeah, he has a lot of things he said. For example, intelligent design is one area where it falls down, because he made some statements about if there are things that could not be strung together, evolutionary-wise, then his theory would fail. And that we sort of see in the area of intelligent design and something called irreducible complexity. And I'll give you, I'm not trying to get too technical
No,
here,
it's okay.
but an example of irreducible complexity is, believe it or not, is the mousetrap. A mousetrap will not function unless every single one of those parts is functioning.
Wow.
Okay, we just try it out sometime. It will not. I mean, you could take a mousetrap, take everything apart, except the flap, and put it on as a tie clip, fine, but it's not functioning as a mousetrap. Well, we literally have hundreds, if not thousands, of processes in our bodies, like blood clotting, the eye, many other processes that are unexplainable, because if you remove any one step or any one part from any of those processes, you don't function. So how do you explain something like that being created?
Well, I like what Genesis 1 says. In the beginning, God
Yeah,
created
yeah.
the heaven and the earth. And then I like where it says in verse 26, then God said, let us make man in our image.
Yeah.
And so right there it is.
Right.
And this book has been proven over and over and over again.
The first 10 words of the Bible are the most important words ever written. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Yeah.
Now, as a scientist, was this something you had to battle?
Not really. No, I've been. I was baptized at age 10.
Oh, so it was all your life.
So all my life, and I was able to be work in the field of science with no problem.
But what about that verse in 26? It said, "Make man in our image." You know, so how would a scientist look at the word "our"?
I would say our means our. You have the Father,
Yeah.
Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
That's
3 in 1.
3 in 1. Yes. That's
The
exactly
Father
what that
thought
means.
it, the Son spoke it, and the Holy Ghost did it.
Exactly. Right.
Making
And
our image.
and the second verse of Genesis says, "And the Spirit of the Lord was over the face of the earth."
Yeah, that's the Holy Spirit.
So it was
yeah.
there from the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
And that's what, for example, the creation. We've heard of the Big Bang Theory. You've heard of that.
Yeah.
Well, that says that had to be a creator. There had to be a beginner or a beginning in order to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know that there's a beginning. Well, we as Christians, we think we know who that beginner is.
We know.
Yes.
So I love this book because this will really help answer questions for an atheist. This will help answer questions for your children. I made a little book for my kids that they would never forget. And I think that this is a very important book that you can leave with your children. You don't have to write it. It's one that you can leave with your children and go through it with them because it talks like, does God exist? Does God speak to us? Yes, he does. Does God really live? If so, who is he? Was Jesus the Messiah and the divine? It answers all these questions. Did Jesus fulfill prophecy? We got it
Yeah.
right here. So,
Well, those, by the way, are the very same questions that our young people are asking. And in my opinion, our churches and our parents are not answering them. And that's why we have the problem we have today, is that we're selling our children short on an intellectual basis. They have key questions that need to be asked, and the only but the only institution that's capable of doing this for them, it's not the public school, it's the church. And the church should not be running away from controversial issues like evolution and creation. Just because the schools want to teach one side, the church needs to step up and teach its side too, from an intellectual knowledge base.
well, just like Angela's now in a public school, and they said the other day that Allah is the same God we worship.
It's not.
No, he's not. No, he's not.
No.
With Allah, you die for him. Our God died for us.
Yeah.
And so, but they teach these children these things. Mom and Dad, you need to find out. We found out what book it was. It was McGregor that put this book out. And a lot of these books come from Saudi Arabia. And so, of course, we're going to fight it. And I've got several pastors. Pastor Sanders said, I'll fight it with you. And we will not allow these books in our school. They're going to teach our children false doctrine.
Right. Well, but also the church needs to be proactive.
Yes.
You know, we talk about apologetics, and that's what this book is, basically. It's a book on apologetics for young people and their parents.
A lot of people don't even know what that means.
I know.
So tell
yeah,
them.
and let's get that straight. That's good. Apologetics is not an apology. It means a defense of the faith. It comes from the Greek word apologia. The Apostle Paul was a perfect example of that. He did it repeatedly when he was brought before the magistrates. He gave the best cases of apologetics. But how did he do it? And that's the key. He knew. And he knew with certainty because he was at a time when he had access to the eyewitnesses, which were the disciples themselves. And he had his own encounter with Jesus. So he knew with certainty, and that's the whole purpose of this book, is I want people to know that with certainty. So that they can go into any arena, regardless of who what I call the challenger is, whether it's the college professor, the high school principal, a peer, or whatever, that they can handle themselves on an intellectual basis, that they know their faith. Not only to defend the faith, which is the definition of apologetics, but I'm saying we need to be on offense to contend for the faith.
Yeah.
I'll give an example in the book there. I'm a big Denver Bronco fan, having lived in Colorado for a long time. Well, the Broncos won the Super Bowl, 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 years ago. They said, the defense won the Super Bowl. Well, yeah, defenses do win, but you have to put points on the board.
Yeah.
You have to be on the offense.
The one that runs it down there and puts it in.
Exactly, yes.
Wow. Well, it talks about the New Testament. It just asks a lot of questions. And I was doing that to my children Sunday. We were driving back from the zoo, and so I thought, well, I'll use the zoo to start with animals. Where is lion found in the Bible? Well, Daniel and the lion's den.
The Lion of Judah, yeah.
And well, she also said that, the Lion of Judah. And they would start answering all the different questions I was asking them. And I just think that we need to drill our children with some of these things.
Right.
And I was so surprised. They were having fun. They made it a game. Whoever hit first got to answer the question, because they were, those kids, and I couldn't find one question that I could ask that they didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I remember back to my own childhood growing up, and I was Southern Baptist, grew up in Southern Baptist, which I think is a great denomination.
Yes.
And one of the things they really stressed was Christian education. We don't do that anymore. We don't even call it Christian education. We call it Sunday school, which is okay. That's what we call it. But back then,
a lot of them don't even have that anymore.
Right. And what they do have is so watered down.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun and games. We need to treat Christian education with the same emphasis that we treat secular education, high school, junior high, middle school, and so forth, with the same emphasis, because that is the sort of the competition that we have. We need to be very serious about our education, because if we don't, these kids are growing up and they're not going to know these answers, and they can easily fall victim to some kind of person in a position of power and influence. And I've had one case in my own family, and they are. But the other thing that by the way, this book is based on a lot of research, which we're not talking about, but one of the things I used to think, well, the college professors were all bad. They're the ones that are changing our kids.
They are.
But no, they're not.
The church.
The church has dropped the ball. The parents have dropped the ball. What they found out now is kids, when they go into college, are not prepared for the faith. Give you a statistic. This is scary. This comes from the Barna Research Group, Lifeway Research, Pew Research. They all agree on this. We'll lose 70% of our evangelical Christian students on graduation from high school. 70%. And now, requalify that, for at least 1 year. Okay? 46% of those, which it turns out to be 32% overall, of all of our evangelical Christian kids graduating high school will never, ever return to the faith. Now, when you plot that out, which I've done, I'm writing another book on that subject, in about 20 years from now, the Christian faith in America will be less than what we call the non-affiliated folks in America that have no faith at all. 20 years from now. I think this is a wake-up call for the church.
It is.
That it better get its act together when it comes to young people and Christian education, and to start taking it seriously. In 1930, Charles Potter, who is the founder of the secularist humanist movement, said these words, and I actually have them in the book. And I will paraphrase because I don't remember them exactly, but he said basically that the public school education has our kids 5 days a week for 8 hours a day. How can they possibly compete? How can a church possibly compete that has the kids 1 or 2 hours a week with this? And they have pronounced victory 2 years later. 2 years later, that said, it doesn't matter if Johnny doesn't read. It does matter that he doesn't believe in Adam and Eve. I mean, and that is what's happened in America. And secular humanism has influenced our public education. And that's not to indict all teachers. Teaching is one of the most noble professions you can have. But they have shackles upon them as to what they can and cannot teach.
And they're changing our books, our history books. It's amazing what's happening in public education.
Revisionist history, that's called.
And just like this teacher, Tammy said she believes this teacher is a Christian that had to teach about Allah.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, Mom and Dad, you need to start praying, and you need to take charge of your own home. You should, instead of just letting the kids watch TV until it's time to go to bed, take a little time of worship. Eat around your dinner table. Talk about these matters.
Exactly.
Because we don't do that anymore. And that's how relationships form. That's how your children learn to talk to each other. This is a wonderful tool, but it's also a very bad tool. Because people, you go to watch at a restaurant and see how many people are doing this instead of having conversation.
Right.
So I'm just challenging you. My grandson, I had one grandson that was going to be a minister. He went to a secular college, and today he's just floundering. He's supposed to be a minister, but he's secular job, not doing what God called him to do. Ever since he's a child, he said, I'm going to be a preacher. And God will bring him back because I'm praying for him. But I have another grandson who is accepted by numbers of universities for playing baseball. But Liberty University just accepted him.
Good school.
It's a great school.
Yeah.
And I've been praying, God, make a way for him, because they have to come up with $30,000 for him to go there. They accept him for baseball, but they only have 11 scholarships, and those were given out last year. So there's no scholarship for him. And I'm saying, and he's full paid scholarship at the secular schools. And I'm saying, Lord, please, it's not about the money. God, make a way for him that he can go to this Liberty University. So I'm praying. Y'all pray with me. Come on. This is Alex, and he is a great ball player. He played for the Orlando, whatever. It's a Orlando travel team that you have to be chosen to play.
Right.
The Giants, San Francisco Giants are after him. And I said, you need your education. I don't care that they're after you. You need your education, number one. What if you get hurt the first year? Then what are you going to do?
Right.
And you need a godly education. You need to go to Liberty. So y'all just pray with me.
Well, going to Liberty, he has one great opportunity. I mentioned it in the book, in fact. He can go to a class there that's given by Dr. Gary Habermas. He is the world's authority on the resurrection of Jesus.
Wow.
And I encourage our students that come out of Fort Myers and our youth group at our church, Santa Mel Community Church, to go and take his class. Because he is the foremost authority. You cannot hear him and see all the factual information he has and not come away believing that Jesus rose from the dead.
Wow.
So
That gives me chills. Well, and I'm all about the kids. That's my number one thing, is get these kids serving the Lord. Well, David, go ahead and sing for us, and we'll be back with more. We have this book available for you. I'm telling you now, Mom and Dad, you don't know how to explain Jesus' existence. You don't know how to explain things because you've been dumbed down. You need this book. And this book will help you. We'll talk about being dumbed down when we get back. Let's go to David.
Dumbed down.
This is a generational thing.